Joining us now, a man who's way too handsome to be a print journalist from Fox Sports, it's Bruce Feldman.
Yay! Yeah. How about that? I don't know if this is working or not, but you know what? We'll stay with it.
A handsome comment at 6 a.m.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
All right, so Bruce Feldman, Fox Sports senior college football columnist, and let's dive right in. What did the committee get right yesterday?
I think Clemson had the best case, the best resume to be number one. I think LSU should be number two. LSU had a really good win. Florida came in there undefeated. I think Leonard Fournette's the best player in college football. So I like the first two. I think they got that part right.
And then they got the next two wrong?
Yeah, then I think they got a little caught up and given the benefit of the doubt to the two best coaches in college football, which they gave Alabama and Ohio State got the next two spots. And I think Ohio State, when you look at their resume, you guys were talking about this before, it's not great. I mean, they don't have any top wins over top 25 teams. And some of the games they played, you look at what they did against Indiana, they struggled. They struggled against NIU, who's a good MAC team, but it's still a MAC team. There isn't anything that's like a wow thing. Now, I think it's still early, and this doesn't mean a ton right now. Doesn't mean really anything right now, to be honest. But I think that Ohio State's going to be a really, show their muscle, but they haven't done it yet so far. And Alabama has a loss at home to Ole Miss. The last time out, they barely beat a Tennessee team that's around 500. They barely beat them, and this was in Tuscaloosa. So I'm a little surprised that those teams, I think the eyeball test is one thing, but I think the credibility of those two coaches as much as anything else.
But take me into that, the committee's, room. When they have, let's close the doors and, they're sequestered in there. How much is factored in of the name recognition, name value, whether it's Alabama here and it's Urban Meyer's Ohio State. You mentioned the coaches here, and you want to have the two top coaches here. But isn't that's supposed to be put outside and not brought into these rooms?
It is, but I think there's a subliminal quality to it. I don't want to say that it's done necessarily intentionally, but I think there is you can fall into the category of the eyeball test, but I would use, and I think you guys were going in this direction because we see it more in the NCAA basketball tournament with the blind resume. If you put up the blind resume of Iowa versus Ohio State, I'd find it hard to believe that anybody would have put Ohio State, 6 slots in front of Iowa. Iowa has 3 wins over teams that are 6-2 or better. They beat Wisconsin on the road. They crushed Northwestern on the road. Northwestern is the team that beat Stanford. So I think that's a good one. They also beat Pitt.
But if you know this, Bruce, how does the committee not know this and factor this in?
I think they factor it in to some degree, but I think it comes back to, the eyeball test. And, again, the eyeball test is a convenient way sometimes to factor in brand power and just kind of, if you ask me, who do I think would win between Ohio State and Iowa, not even on a neutral field, if it was played in Iowa, I would pick Ohio State. But I think at this point of the year, you still got to go. It still, to me, is most deserving at this point, and right now we're not there yet.
What about Memphis?
Good team with a really nice win over Ole Miss. I think Justin Fuente is a rising star in coaching, terrific quarterback in Paxton Lynch. I'm not surprised that they were not in the top 10. They're around there. Mm-hmm. They're going to have a chance. They got to hope that, it was unfortunate for them. Temple couldn't beat Notre Dame because that would have given more conference, heft to the AAC. I don't know if they can, get much closer. They're going to need a bunch of 2 and 3 loss conference champs, and that's not that realistic.
What about, we're talking to Bruce Feldman, covers college football for Fox Sports. We look at the numbers that Baylor and TCU putting up. So when they put up 60 or 70, how much does that factor in the wow factor, or do they look at it and say, all right, so what? Everybody's scoring big numbers here.
I think it comes down to there's not a lot of respect for the Big 12 defenses. And you look and say, okay, they have really good offense. And then a lot of other people, if they're not in the conference, will say, nobody tackles in that league. And I think, fair or unfair, the committee sent a message to Baylor especially and said, look, because Baylor's the one team that's dominated everybody. There hasn't been a close game. But their non-conference is so bad and so laughable where, none of the teams they played are over 500 in the non-conference. One of them is an FCS team. SMU is awful right now. So, and Rice is just okay at his mid-major. So they haven't given you much to work with. But on the positive side, Baylor has 3 top 15 teams coming up. They're going to get a chance to prove it. But right now, I think the message is you have no margin for error if you're in the Big 12. If you're TCU or if you're Baylor, if you lose one time, you're probably the one Power 5 conference where it's over for you.
How much does it factor in that this is a reality show? That you're getting, you're trying to put on a good TV product, and you want to have, crowds, fan bases travel. It's different than March Madness because people will go to the Final Four just to watch the Final Four. You don't have to have all of Duke's fan base there. But you need Ohio State to travel and Alabama to travel. Does that factor in at all? Will that factor in at all? And did it last year?
Well, I'd preface it by saying, look, we had this show, not we, but ESPN has the show every Tuesday night. Every college football fan is going to be buzzing about it. They don't need to do these rankings now. And in fact, if I'm Jeff Long, who's the committee chair, it kind of boxes him into a weird place where people parse everything he says. Yeah. And I think Jeff Long is a really intelligent guy, and I think he's a decent man. But I think it's very easy for fan bases to make him the villain because he's being pushed out there to defend what he says, and there's a lot of scrutiny. Now, the back end of it, if you had said, substituted going in the blind resume and said it was Texas and Oklahoma were the 2 teams we were discussing, not TCU and Baylor, go back 5 years. TCU and Baylor were not on the radar nationally. They weren't even on the radar in the Big 12, really. So if you put those 2 brands out there, I don't think Ohio State's going to trump Texas or Oklahoma if those are the teams we're discussing. And I just think that's a reality, and I think that it's an uncomfortable place for the committee people to talk about. But I mean, you couldn't convince me otherwise. And I've been through their mock selection process down in Dallas, and I like a lot of the people who are involved in it. But I still think, whether it's intended or not, that brand loyalty creeps into a lot of people's thought process.
How does this all play out?
I still think I picked Ohio State in the preseason. I still think, they have a great coach. They have a really good offensive line. They're good on both sides of the ball. I mean, Ezekiel, it's a fantastic running back. I think they're the most balanced team. And I think sooner or later they'll get it figured out. And I'd be concerned a little bit that they finally go to J.T. Barrett. He finally emerges as a starting quarterback. And then all of a sudden he has a really bad decision and gets in trouble. And now all of a sudden it's Cardale Jones is back as a starter. I mean, that's the kind of thing where you kind of scratch your head and say, okay, is this maybe not Ohio State's year after all? But I still think they're the best team. Jarrett Stidham is a really good young quarterback at Baylor, but he's a true freshman. Yeah. I think Baylor is the closest thing to, the next best team. And they're really good on both lines. They have a great system. I think Art Briles really knows what he's doing. It's just now they're playing a true freshman at quarterback, and we'll see how that's going to play out.
Can Clay Helton win the job at USC?
He can, but the biggest thing is he's got to beat UCLA. USC did not want the last interim head coach. At least Pat Hayden did not want to hire Ed Ogeron as the head coach. He beat Stanford, their top 5, and he's rolling. He's got the big money boosters in his corner, and then he loses to UCLA. They haven't beat UCLA since Jim Mora's been there. If Clay Helton can win all the games and beat UCLA, I think he could force his way into the job because that'll say, hey, the players are playing hard for him. I think it's still a bit of a long shot that they're going to be consistent enough because they've found a way to kind of stumble at times over teams they should have beaten, and I think some point that's going to rear its head again.
Is Miami a good job?
Yeah, because as long as you have the best recruiting base in the country, which it is, that's going to always trump almost any other factor. Because for years, you go back 20 years when they were winning championships, unless they played Florida State, they had a half-empty stadium. The facilities were much worse back then. Different coaches come and go, but the recruiting base and the brand power is incredibly big. And all those kids grow up wanting to be Canes, and all their families around them want them to be Canes. They don't grow up wanting to be a UCF Knight or a South Carolina Gamecock or a Louisiana or Louisville Cardinal. And I think because of that, it's a good job, but it has challenges because they don't have a ton of money, and they have stadium issues too.
The book, The QB, The Making of Modern Quarterbacks, Bruce Feldman, out in paperback. You have something on Josh Rosen, the UCLA quarterback, in here. A lot of Johnny Manziel in here. Knowing what you wrote and what you've seen with Manziel, are you surprised at his lack of success and maturity in the pros?
No, the immaturity part, that I could see coming. I spent a ton of time around Johnny, and there were some moments where there were head-scratching moments. And
how did the Browns not know how immature he was?
I don't know. I don't know that process because you spend a fortune. They actually, I got into this in the book. They did so much extra research on this, and everything that they had studied told them take Teddy Bridgewater. And then the owner wanted Johnny Manziel. And look, Johnny Manziel's ability to make plays and make it all work in spite of the chaos, especially at Texas A&M, was kind of intoxicating for a lot of people. And maybe clearly it was for the Browns. Now, I still think Johnny Manziel can have success as an NFL quarterback, but there is a maturation process, and I think they really got to worry about who the people Johnny Manziel has around him. I mean, he's still very young, and I think last year was the first time in his life where his plan B wasn't good enough because the NFL was so hard, and I think he really struggled with it.
The book is The Quarterback, The Making of Modern Quarterbacks, Bruce Feldman. Bruce, great to see you. I know you got a busy schedule. We appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you guys.